The Topiary Cat, Chapter 9, Grandpa and the Colonel. I have to see Grandpa again, Mummy. There are odd things happening in the gardens at Nefertum Hall. Is it all right if I go there now? I haven't any homework today, and I do have important things to tell him. Katie was quite easy to persuade, and Richard had already had a cup of tea and a piece of cake. "Don't be late for dinner, though, Richard," she shouted after him. 7 o'clock sharp." She was joking, of course. The boy had no sense of time passing, so she nearly always had to keep his food warm for him. It was still afternoon when he arrived at the hall, so he was convinced Grandpa would be working. He couldn't see him in the grounds, so he headed towards the estate office, noting on the way that most of the statues had been replaced, and the last one was being lifted back onto its plinth using a forklift truck. He usually found such pieces of machinery irresistible, but this time he was impatient to see Baba. When he arrived at the small wooden estate building, he held back. It was crowded with people. Some uniformed police officers, a few of the gardeners, including Peter, and the commanding figure of Colonel Greenwood. Richard found him rather intimidating, being very tall, with a bushy moustache and a military bearing. He also had a booming voice, which seemed to carry for miles. Richard could hear that voice clearly from yards away. "Well, you lot had better keep a watch on this place then, hadn't you? It must have taken a number of strong men to get the statues that far. And you tell me you didn't hear a thing, Peter? Extraordinary. I want this sorted out before Falcon, or else." The policeman looked somewhat abashed too, having also been reprimanded by the Colonel for dereliction of their duties. This was most unfair, but typical of this ex-military man. He had no time for shirkers or anyone who didn't do exactly what he expected of them, even if they had not been directly ordered to do so. He demanded initiative, self-reliance, and total loyalty from his employees. To be fair to the Colonel, he was actually very concerned. He felt he was merely the custodian of Nefertum Hall for future generations, and honoured to be in a position to restore it to some of its former glory. When the small crowd had dispersed, leaving Baba alone at his desk, Richard ventured inside. Grandpa looked up, but his look was not quite as kindly as usual. He looked older, and more tired too. "Oh, hello, Richard," he sighed. "I'm up to my neck in work at the moment. The truck has made deep furrows in the lawn and damaged some of the rose bushes. We have to sort that out before the weekend. There are important guests coming to say for Falcon. I still don't know what's going on, and now on top of all that, we're going to have to set up a night watch in case the thieves return." Richard looked downcast. He felt whatever he had to say had receded in importance compared to Baba's problems right now. What had this Falcon thing got to do with anything? However, he had noticed some old sepia photographs on Grandpa's desk that looked interesting. They were obviously very old indeed, and quite faded, including images of the garden showing features that had now been lost. "Baba, I can see you're very busy, so I shan't bother you now. Is there any chance you could lend me those photos? I think there may be something there that could help us find out more about these mysteries." Baba was only too happy to send the boy away with the photos. He knew how careful he would be. He put them inside a thick leather-bound folio for protection, and after a short lecture on their historical importance, sent the boy on his way. Katie was startled to see Richard return well before dinner, but not so surprised when he rushed up to his room, barely acknowledging her on the way. Tolly was already in Richard's room, fast asleep on the bed, having spent a long day hunting animals that didn't wish to be caught. He was exhausted, and probably rather miffed at his failure to catch any tasty rodents. Richard laid the precious photos out on the desk and began to study them with a magnifying glass. Don't miss the next chapter of The Topiary Cat, read by Richard Saunders.